All right, welcome everybody to Old News with Flint Dibble. Yes, we are back, and here we go with some intro music. Okay, and we have made it to Old News with Flint Dibble, episode number 4. And we are off to the races. It looks like my audio is working. Woohoo! I got a new shirt on. We have some fun news stories from archaeology to share. I got myself a gin and tonic. We're all set up and ready to go. We're waiting on our special guest, but she'll be here in about 10 minutes or so. In the Sorry, everybody. Let's start this segment over again so that we can do this properly. So what we're thinking about here is the first story after... Sorry about that, everybody. Sorry. That's audio should now be better. Let's wait for some confirmation. Okay, good. Good. I just had the wrong thing. Clearly the settings were off. So we're going to start off with some chicka, 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 chicka. Sorry about that, everybody. Audio is much clearer now. We will cut out the beginning of this for those that come in the future. And we have beautiful audio coming in as we go chicka, 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 chicka. So, all right. Our first news story for the day is the oldest settlement in Europe. Off the coast of Lake Ohrid in Albania is this underwater settlement that has recently been explored by a combo team of Swiss and Albanian archaeologists. So to put this in context, so we can see where we are, Lake Ohrid is right here. It's at the border of North Macedonia and Albania. Down here is Lake Prespa at the border of the tri-state border of Albania, North Macedonia, and Greece. So this is the region that we're talking about here. It's the oldest agricultural settlement in Europe, has recently been dated and discovered. And they were able to date it because the lake preservation, the waterlogged nature of it, preserved the wood for the last 7,000 years. So it dates back to 5,000 years before BCE. And that is 7,000 years before now. And these were the first farmers to enter Europe. And so we have a really secure date by dating the tree rings of the kind of stilts, the piles that this lake settlement was built on. So they were built into the lake, and their wooden village was held up by these kind of wooden beams that we can sort of see right here, that this underwater archaeologist is excavating in the lake. And so this is right off the coast of Lin in the region of Pogradec in Albania that we're talking about. And it's an area that I know very well. I actually got to excavate in this region a settlement that must be the second settlement in the region. We'll get to it in a second, but here's some of the finds from the region. This region is particularly rich in finds due to the waterlogged environment of it. So you can see all these Neolithic settlements clustered around these lakes, Lake Ohrid up here, Lake Prespa, Lake Malich, which we'll get to in a second. That's no longer a lake. It was drained, and therefore that's how they discovered this material. And then down in northern Greece, Lake Kastoria has the Spilio, which is a very famous settlement. So this is a very important region for the first farmers to arrive in Europe from Southwest Asia, from Anatolia. So they arrived and they came here. And so this region was first discovered, the potential for Neolithic settlements, when Lake Malich was drained in Albania. Right after World War II, they started draining it. And up popped from the bottom of this waterlogged context, this kind of wooden stakes, these piles they're called, which the village would have been built upon. And so it was just a wonder. It was excavated by Muzaffer Korkuti, as well as others. Thank you, Muzaffer, for the bottle of raki you once gave me. It was delicious. We finished it a decade ago. And I got to excavate in this region at a Neolithic site at Vashtami, which is in the area where Lake Malich was. And so it again had just some phenomenal preservation. We were in the middle of this agricultural field now, very carefully sieving and cataloging what we found. We studied everything indoors, and my partner and wife, the producer for the channel, Yoni, she was the registrar in charge of the lab for this project. It was a really, really cool project. And at the time, I was in charge of the plant remains, not studying them. I don't study plant remains, I study animal bones, but I'm an environmental archaeologist. And so I was in charge of collecting the plant remains. I built this flotation tank with the director of the project you see there, Dr. Susan Allen, the co-director. And we built these tanks with the sort of recycled water and everything in order to collect plant remains. Because how do you collect plant remains? Have any of you seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail? So, what floats besides witches? This is how you tell whether someone is a witch or not, because witches, they burn, and wood burns. And what else do you do with witches? Well, you throw them in the water because they float just like wood, because wood floats. And so plant remains float. So when you put a bucket of sediment from an archaeological site into a bucket of water, and you sort of pump air through it to separate out the plant remains, they float to the top and they drain off into the sieve, and then we can study those plant remains. And this is how we study early agriculture, for example. And so the project that I was part of, directed by Susan Allen and Alir Japali, it shed new light on this region. We had some very early radiocarbon dates, and we had a wide variety of plant remains and animal remains. By the way, those early dates are now superseded by this new project that just found those dendrochronology dates at Lean, nearby, of course. And so what's really interesting is this array of plants and animals, and not just sort of agricultural plants and herded animals, but they also used these lake environments. They were extremely biodiverse, and they hunted and they gathered as well as they grew crops. And so this led Susan to propose that actually this was the earliest region that farmers first settled in Europe. And they support a model not of just moving in a linear direction from Asia to Europe, but actually selecting the best terrain, this rich, water-rich, biodiverse ecosystem that they settled in. And so this is why at the end of this little clip, if I can go back to it, if we zoom in on Lake Ohrid, that's all the way over here at the border of North Macedonia and Albania. But they're coming, of course, by land, right? There's no passage by sea. So they're coming from Anatolia, from what's modern day Turkey, through the isthmus, and then they're selecting this lake environment with these really quite large lakes and this biodiverse region for settling in first, because it is an ideal space to settle. And so this is a sort of selective settlement rather than directional pattern of expansion, this sort of introduction of new technology and new people to what we think of as Europe today. This is how it happened and where it ends up first. And the entire region has a number of really, really important sites, which have some really, really cool stuff in them. So let's just really quickly hop by a few sites. There's Dunavets, also in Albania. And this article also just came out, and it's directed by some of the same people Albert Hafner was one of the directors on the excavation of that dendrochronology at Lean. And then Alir Japali right here, he was co-director of the project I was on in Vashtami. So it's the same various teams sharing together resources to be able to work together to answer this mystery of when and how these first farmers arrived. And so this was actually excavated back in 1971, also by Muzaffer Korkuti. And they came in and they found the old trenches. They found some architectural material. They found more plants, and they found stuff as well that shows this kind of Neolithic pile settlement. Or we can go across the lake to northern Macedonia, over to Plotza, in North Macedonia. And there is another underwater excavation. They found a series of these kind of architectural wooden supports, these piles. And at the same time, they found a variety of waterlogged and charred grains and vegetable materials that are very similar to what was found that we had at Vashtami. And then the last stop in our tour in this region, so we've hit up Ohrid, we've hit up Malich. We're going to go quickly down to Vispilio. And this has been excavated by Greek archaeologists for the last several decades. And they've also found similar piles. And this is a really nice place to go visit because they've reconstructed what this settlement would have looked like. It would have looked kind of like this in this lake environment. Everything would have been on these kind of piles, from the pathways to the houses. And they found evidence of all these kinds of things. And they've reconstructed this, and you can get a sense of what it was like to live in the Neolithic period in this sort of wet lake environment that was extremely biodiverse. You would have been digging not with metal, of course, but with the hose made of scapulas, shoulder blades from cattle, as well as they would have had pottery and things like that, basket making, and it was extremely rich and biodiverse. It's a really interesting region for the Neolithic culture, the first Neolithic culture in what we think of as Europe today. So that's our first segment. And now we have a special guest to help me finish up the episode. We have Rachel. Wait, Rachel, where'd you go? Uh-oh. Your camera's not working, Rachel. Wait, let me ping you on WhatsApp. Oh, there you are. Hey, I can't hear you, though. No audio. Okay, take your time.
That?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Perfect.
Yeah, I had some troubles too. I had the wrong mic on, and everybody yelled at me for having the wrong mic.
Yeah, my headphones are my husband's, and they're really good quality, but like the plug into our computer, if you move the cable by by a fraction of a millimeter, it's like, no.
Don't do it. You're good. Yeah. You look and you sound great. You're flickery because of your background, but otherwise all good.
That's fine. This is one of my favorite photos. You can't really see me in here, but in the corner, this is me excavating in the view of Edinburgh Castle. So I thought that would make for a nice background.
Very, very nice. So if you don't subscribe to Inside Archaeology on YouTube, this is Rachel from Inside Archaeology. You should go subscribe right now. And we're going to transition at 8 o'clock UK. That would be 3 p.m. Eastern, to her premiere, which is going to cover a range of different archaeological newses, including some stories that we'll prep now. But we have different ones for this and some overlaps. So it's going to be different. Don't worry. And she has a lot more. She goes through them quicker than I do. I like to dive in and get my teeth into.
Yeah, you're the like feature, like deep dive, and I'm like, my aim is to be like the general news show.
Okay, there you go. So, all right, we have another news story coming up. Wait, no, wrong way. There we go. Let's make this go chugga chugga. 1 second. This is my audience. My audience loves this. Chugga chugga chugga. Chugga chugga chugga. Sifting the news.
You have to get you'll have to get a sound bite for that.
Yeah, seriously. I think there's some sound on this thing, but it also sort of has other kinds of sound as well. Wait a second. You joining. There we go. That's the aesthetic that I wanted. Okay, so let's move on to number 2. And we thought we'd spend some time chatting about our old friend Pompeii. Because Pompeii, there's evidence that it was actually reoccupied now after the eruption of Vesuvius destroyed the town. So this was really cool to me. I have to say, it fits in. I think there's a competition going on between different directors of the park, because the previous director, Massimo Ossana, he redated when the Vesuvius erupted. So he published an article based off finding of this graffiti, that this graffiti says on the 17th of October, he indulged in food in an excessive way. And he put together a wide variety of evidences, including this graffito, but like this coin of Titus, why is this in Pompeii? Because Titus was not emperor until like a couple months after the eruption of Vesuvius supposedly happened in August. And so this evidence plus the evidence of fresh fruit that would have only been ready in the autumn caused him to redate the eruption to October or November. So this, of course, gives us a different perspective on kind of agriculture and seasonality and whatnot at the site, which is really, really cool. But the new director of the project, I guess he's not that new anymore, but he's been there for a few years, Gabriel Zuchtriegel. He's now come and said, you know what? It doesn't matter when Pompeii, when Vesuvius erupted. What matters is that people came back afterwards. So I think that's really cool. What's your take on this story?
I think it's really interesting, and like it was across quite a few headlines, which is why I'm featuring it in Archaeology News. And um, I think it's one of those things where at the end of it, they talked about how this evidence has been overlooked for such a long time because people have been so keen to get to the perfectly preserved layers of all the frescoes and everything that's been really well, like that was buried by the initial volcanic ash, that this evidence was just previously just kind of like shoved to the side, which people don't really think of archaeologists doing that. Um,
Yeah,
so
that's a very good point.
yeah,
I
it's
also caught that, and in fact, Yoni, who helped me by reading the Italian of the article, she sent me this screenshot in a hurry, where what it says here, and it's I don't read Italian, but for those that read Italian, it basically is talking about Queen Carolina. So she's the queen, not of France, actually. Yoni got that wrong. She's the queen of Naples. She's Napoleon's little sister in the
mm,
19th century, and she actually wanted to go ahead and excavate the entire site and like all of Pompeii.
wow,
And like you were saying, how were they excavating at the time? What were they interested in?
just the destruction layer basically from the eruption. So
And
yeah.
so all the reoccupation evidence that they encountered, they threw out. And if they would have excavated the entire site, well, we might not have discovered that the site was reoccupied, for example, because that's only recently, that's right
Mhm.
now been figured out, right?
I'm
Um,
interested to know that coin that you just featured of Titus, because where that was found. Because when I was reading the press release for this, they were talking about how Titus sent two ex-consuls to Pompeii and Herculaneum to try and refound it after the disaster. So,
mhm.
does this coin is that actually evidence of when the eruption happened differently, or is that from this attempt at a reoccupation or when people were moving back in?
Yeah,
And yeah, like
that's a
that
good
brings that
question.
all into question. And
I do not
yeah.
remember exactly where it was found. For some reason, I think it was found in an old excavation, but I could be wrong.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's been something that's been lingering for a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I think that separating out the evidence for when it erupted versus reoccupation is kind of tricky. One of the
Mhm.
things that struck me about this article was that they're actually so the Zuchtriegel and his colleagues they sort of separated the reoccupation into two phases. The like sort of soon after the eruption, so the first to the third century AD, and then late antiquity, so third to the fifth centuries AD. And to be honest, what surprised me was the first phase didn't really have much archaeological evidence. It was mostly the historical evidence you're talking about how Titus sent people there, and there's some descriptions in Cassius Dio and elsewhere where they talk about people going back to Pompeii. And
Mhm.
for a long time, that was interpreted just as looting. You know what I mean? To try
Yeah.
to steal treasure from the ruins of the city.
Mhm. And it's interesting as well. I think the thing that struck me about it was that people are going back there and they had no idea if this volcano was going to erupt again or not. Modern day, we have all of these like systems around Vesuvius because it's still an active volcano. So that, and there's the occupation like line around it where people aren't allowed to like live up to a certain point in case there's another eruption, and they watch it to make sure. But interestingly, when I went for the first time to Pompeii a few years ago, it was in the end of May, beginning of June, when the Italian Independence Day was the day that I happened to be at
Huh.
Pompeii. Didn't know this. And you're walking around the archaeological park, and somewhere else, they all of a sudden were setting off cannons in
Huh.
celebration. And you're walking around the park, and you just hear this giant boom, and you see everybody just go, "Oh no, do I need to run for my life?" Luckily, we didn't. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was. I
Is that
also
the volcano?
Yeah, it's the volcano going. And the other thing too is I think that not a people always think of Pompeii, obviously it was a disaster. Actually, I should have worn my Pompeii t-shirt, but it's a bit faded, but, so it's not really I can't wear it anymore because I need to get a new one. But, the fact that only 10% of the population died in Pompeii, I think people generally tend to overlook that, or that it gets presented as this like gigantic disaster that killed so many people, which is true. That is a tragedy that killed those people. But 90% of them lived and had time to escape the city because it was a multi-day event. So then this brings up the question of what did they do after? Did they all just like disperse to other places? Could all of them afford to do that? And then this brings in the theory that perhaps some of them came back to attempt to kind of rebuild their lives because they just couldn't or they wouldn't go anywhere else.
Yeah, I think the more we poke and prod at Pompeii, we're first amazed again. So many of these stories, I imagine my audience is sort of realizing so many of the stories of archaeology have to do with preservation. Whether it's the wood from the previous story I showed around all those lakes in Albania and North Macedonia and Greece, or whether it's the preservation we have at Pompeii due to the eruption of Vesuvius, this is oftentimes front and center of the story. But the more we poke and prod at these stories, the more I think we are surprised by the resilience of people in the past.
Hmm.
And I think that's the story of Pompeii that I oftentimes take away from. So, in 62 AD, there was a major earthquake that shook the city and knocked down quite a bit of it. This relief, if you notice how everything's a little tilted,
Hmm.
that's because it's tilted in the relief. This is a relief of the earthquake, where this is on the tomb of someone buried outside of Pompeii. They showed the fucking earthquake. Sorry, excuse my
Hmm.
language. I'm allowed to curse on my own channel. And around the site of Pompeii, we have evidence everywhere you look of earthquake repair. And
Hmm.
so this image at the bottom, it shows some repairs to this doorway and the wall there. And the argument that this scholar is making, I'm blanking on the name right now, is that this is actually from right before Vesuvius erupted. So there were maybe some earthquakes that we don't know about in the historical record. The
Hmm.
one in 62 AD was a massive one. These would have been a series of smaller ones. And that's why across the city, we see repairs actually happening in process. They were trying to repair from the earthquakes that were happening right before the volcano went off. And then the volcano went off. And
Hmm.
then now we have evidence that they're returning afterwards and they're reoccupying the site. So it really is a story more of resilience than
Yeah.
of disaster, even if it's disaster that preserved the stuff for us.
Hmm. It's ironic that, all those earthquakes beforehand, nobody thought to be like, maybe this isn't a good spot because those are all would have been warning signs of the fact that the volcano is about to go off, which
Yeah,
we obviously know. But yeah.
we know that, but they don't necessarily know
Hmm.
that. We have to say that like earthquakes are a fairly common feature in the Mediterranean, at least not uncommon, let's say. And
Hmm.
so it becomes something that you might shrug off as something that
True.
we know happened.
True.
Um,
We have a friend who's from Istanbul, and she remarked once to my husband about how it's so nice to live in the UK and to not have to worry about earthquakes. And we were just like, really? Like that's something that you have to worry about in day to day? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've experienced a lot of earthquakes in Greece. I don't know. I might be able to. I could. It would take at least two hands to count the numbers that I can experience because I can remember maybe seven of them off the top of my head.
Mm.
Um, Nothing really terrible happened in any of the ones I was in, thankfully.
Hmm.
Yeah, like I fell down during one of them, but that was all. I just sort of
Mm.
fell down, scraped my knee. But yeah, there was one. I was going to get drinks from the van, and the earthquake started, and then I came back and the van had been sort of, and I was like, what's going on here? Because I was in this van, and then I came back, I was like, was that an earthquake? Everybody's like, yeah, that was an earthquake. Because
Ours was just potholes.
that's about how well, I wasn't driving the van. I
Oh,
was just,
okay.
yeah, but it was sort of like you know how you get in an automobile that's parked on an archaeological site and it moves for a second.
Hmm.
So it was just the timing of it that made me unsure, because that's about half the earthquakes is like, was that an earthquake? And everybody's like, yeah, I felt that too. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
I also it's just making me think of I got sent a Steam key to a game that's like if for designed for kids that's like reliving the last day of Pompeii,
Aha.
which is really cool. I'm blanking on the name of it, but I'll have to think of it later. But I didn't play the whole thing, but I played like a couple minutes of it, which was really interesting. I'll have to send it to you.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. I'd love to check
Hmm.
that out. That sounds like a fun little game.
Hmm.
Um, But just so we can prove to people, because I think an image speaks 1,000 words, that this site was reoccupied.
Hmm.
Wait, I have the wrong image up. I don't want to. There we go. Yeah. Um, so these are two of the more obvious
Hmm.
finds of the reoccupation of the site.
Hmm.
So on the left, we have this lovely oven, sort of built above the sort of first floor of this house from Roman Pompeii. And so there's this oven that shows people reoccupying the site that would have been a little village, I suppose, by the third or fourth century
Yeah.
AD or CE.
I think it
Uh,
was rebuilt from a cistern. It's like a repurposed cistern that's been made into an oven.
Huh.
Incorrect.
They found several ovens actually, is
Hmm.
what Yoni told me from her reading her quick skim of the article, was that they had several late antique ovens. But yeah, it makes sense that you'd want to repurpose the cistern. It's perfectly shaped and ready to go in that kind of way. And
Hmm.
then this lamp over here, which is very distinctive. Can anybody make out the really clear marker that this really should be after 79 AD? There's something really, really clear. If anybody can tell, there's some writing on here. It's kind of broken off. Maybe if I show what it should look like if it was complete, we can see what this symbol is. It's a chi rho.
Hmm.
So you have the chi and the rho coming up here. So Christ. It's the anagram. What am I trying to say?
It's like one of the very early symbols of Christianity.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, it like so obviously Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD CE, whichever flavor you prefer. But so yes, that's after Christ, but it's definitely not when these kinds of symbols were being widely used. Whereas, yeah, the late 5th century and the late antique period, I think it's called, um, is when you would expect to see these kinds of things.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. So some really clear, hammered home evidence, and the article's filled with nice examples of hammered home evidence. And the
Mhm.
point, don't excavate an entire site, because what you're interested in might not be what people in the future are interested in to
Mhm.
be able to answer. And every single shovel full of dirt we remove destroys evidence. It's just the way it is.
Mhm.
Archaeology is a game of sampling,
Mhm.
you can only sample an area once.
It's a
So if,
destructive process. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So if you excavate an entire site, there's somebody out on Twitter arguing that Göbekli Tepe as a whole should all be excavated in one go, and
Uh,
it's the stupidest fucking idea in the world, because archaeologists of the future, we're going to destroy all kinds of really interesting evidence if we just excavate something in one go.
I mean, it's
Uh,
also just like I think the thing that for me, it's not even just that, but like logistically, do they know what that involves? Like, I
No,
don't
this is
think
a troll. This is an
yeah, I
online
mean,
troll. He's never done an excavation in
yeah.
his life. If you don't know who we're talking about the guy from Bright Insight, Jimmy Corsetti, who is a troll and a liar, and who thinks that the Göbekli Tepe is being mismanaged when it's being managed fantastically. Go see my interview with the director of Göbekli Tepe, Lee Clare. It's a
Mm,
fantastic interview, and it shows how well managed that project actually is.
yeah.
Um, but
Logistics,
he
people just don't understand how archaeological excavations run.
No, and they just yell and they shout stuff that sounds logical. Why would you not want to excavate the entire site? And it's like you need to teach somebody a university class to explain why you don't want to excavate an entire
Mm,
site. The only time we excavate entire sites is when they're under threat due to
mhm,
construction, like modern construction, or due to flooding, or due to something. They're under threat, so we have to excavate them before they disappear for another reason. That is the only time archaeologists actually these days excavate an entire site. It's
mhm,
a stupid thing to suggest, and does not understand how archaeology works or the history of the field.
mhm.
Yeah, because Pompeii is one of the best examples of why not to excavate an entire site. It has
Yeah,
been under continuous excavation for nearly 200 years
yeah,
since Caroline Bonaparte wanted to clear the entire site. I think
yeah,
it was
and this is all that we've managed to do in that time. Like, it's the same with Giza. Like, Giza's been excavated for hundreds
yeah,
of years, and we've not
hundreds of
found
years. Yeah.
still stuff coming out of there all the
There's
time.
still stuff to do. It's a huge, as you said, it's a
Mhm,
practical logistical thing. And then it's also, we intentionally don't excavate entire sites because we know that we're going to have new questions, new methods in the future that can answer a bunch of really cool stuff, like the fact Pompeii was reoccupied. And yeah. Okay. Shall we move on, or do you have anything else you want to add to this story?
That's it from me.
Okay. Yeah, so don't excavate entire sites.
Or excavate sites at an archaeological pace. You know, if you want to try an 100% excavate a small site, you know, that's the other thing too. Is obviously the size of sites matters, but.
Yeah, but even then, I would never recommend excavating an entire site. Like every project I've worked on, we actually usually intentionally leave areas for future archaeologists. So witness areas, for example, like a witness bed at a Paleolithic site, or you might just excavate even half of a room and leave the other half unexcavated for future people with different methods and different questions. Most projects I've worked on, we intentionally and we think about future excavators when we're backfilling, like at Pompeii. When I dug at Pompeii, we had to backfill at the end of each season because there was no plan or money for. So sorry, let's just go back to that map of Pompeii. So just to bring up this point in clarity. So look, this is the map of it. About 2/3 of the site has been, of the inside the walls, has been excavated down to 79 AD. So clearing out that ash. But very, very little of the site. In fact, our project, I think, was one of the very first large-scale excavations. We were down here by the Port of Stabii to actually focus on the areas underneath the 79 AD floor.
That would be
And
really
so,
cool.
it's like there's so much more to do at Pompeii. In fact, 90% of the site has not been excavated down to bedrock. And so there's always more to do because there's always different questions that we have. The early excavators with Caroline Bonaparte and others, they were interested in that 79 AD layer. Modern excavators are interested in the before and the after, if you see what I mean. And so kind of paying attention to both gives us a better picture of the site itself. But yeah, so don't excavate 100%. And if you have to do it very carefully and sieve
and
everything.
slowly.
Yeah, slowly. Well, commercial archaeology, as you know, it's going to vary.
Well, we're a bit different. We don't 100% excavate sites, but that's more of a budget thing.
Yeah.
And they've just developed, at least in the UK, they've developed techniques so that, like, when they're looking at a site, they're like, okay, we know which areas of the site have the highest likelihood of yielding data that we can use. So that's what we target.
Yeah.
You know,
that makes sense. That makes sense. So, all right, let's sift through some more news. What do I have up here next? The remnants of a 2,000-year-old sunken city lifted out of the sea off of Alexandria. So you're going to cover this in your show. So let's not go into it in too much depth, but do you want to give a little bit of teaser for it?
Sure. So this is just outside of modern Alexandria, but in antiquity.
Oh, wait, I have a
okay.
cool, you mentioned the place and I forgot I have a Google Earth zoom in on for all of these.
Okay.
Let's do it. Just so you know where you are. Bam. And then it's going to be right where it says Google. You can't see it, but it's right where it says Google, I swear. Sorry, go on.
That's
so
okay.
Yes, tell us what they found.
Yeah, so it's outside of modern Alexandria, but in antiquity, it was part of this city called Canopus, which for a very long time was kind of the primary port for trade into and out of Egypt via Greece, or for Greek trade, until Alexandria itself was founded. And even then, it still existed for a long time before, after Alexandria was founded. It probably just got subsumed a bit into the city. But eventually it was consumed by the sea as a variety of shifting water, and then earthquakes, etc., happened to it. Now they've been doing underwater archaeology, which I wonder if Alexandria is like one of the centers for underwater archaeology in the world, because there's just so much there. So they've done a survey of the site, and then they chose 4 statues that satisfied very particular criteria, probably very much to do with the fact that they would be able to survive intact. And they have now craned them out of the water, and they presumably will be displaying them at a museum at some point in Alexandria.
Huh. So the big story to me is it's probably the big story for the news media is the statues.
Mhm.
Um, what were the 4 statues of? Do you remember? I don't remember.
I don't. Nothing. So the news on this was a bit hard to research because the Ministry of Egyptian Antiquities didn't actually put out. Usually, when I look for their news, I find it on Facebook. They're
Mm-hmm.
really good about posting all their stuff on Facebook, not so much on their website, ironically. Um, but they don't have a Facebook post about it. The news that I could find mentioned that this one that we're looking at now, I think that's a Roman marble statue, like a Roman era marble statue. And then there was another one that was a granite Ptolemaic era statue. None of them are complete. They're all missing bits and stuff like that. But those were the 2 that were specifically mentioned. And then underwater, they have a variety of buildings that they found. But I thought kind of the most interesting one was they found a boat with some anchors and a dock with the remnants of a crane, like an
Huh.
ancient ship crane underneath the water, and now they're using modern cranes to lift the statues out. It's very meta.
Very, very cool. There is this cool conversation article that I found,
Mhm,
which has some nice photos, and I'll put in some links into the chat. And you can go to the YouTube video that's there as well.
mhm,
And so it shows them kind of lifting the statues, but it mentions, for example, the key thing, which is that the preservation of archaeological material underwater is variable. Metal
mhm.
objects, it's not good.
Yeah.
Organic materials such as wood can last surprisingly well. And then, of course, stone, it's going to be variable. In my very first old news episode, I think I showed a picture of the Antikythera Hermes.
Mm.
Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, this is one of my favorites for showing the variable preservation underwater because, oh, I'm not sharing my screen. I'm looking at stuff on my screen and I'm not. No, I
No,
am.
we all can
Oh,
see a
but it's
crane.
not showing the. Oh, because I've had some problems with that. One second. Let me see if I can fix that.
No worries.
Um,
I was gonna say, have you been to Alexandria?
no, I've not. I've been to Egypt and I really wanted to go to Alexandria when I was there and I did not.
It's amazing. I've only been once, and it was a day trip many, many years ago, but it's got such a different vibe to the rest of Egypt.
Huh.
Um, it's very like Mediterranean city, or that's what it felt like when I was there.
Okay. I
And
guess I'm not able to share a different tab right
yeah,
now. I'm having issues.
that's okay.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I've heard that it's very different from the rest of Egypt,
Mhm.
and I hope the next time I go there, which I'm hoping will be this winter, to do some research for my book, that I'll
Are you
get
going to
there.
the Biblioteca Alexandria?
Well, it's not bibliography research. It's more like
Ah,
seeing a few sites I haven't been to, like Alexandria. Though Alexandria is not part of my book, so it's kind of pointless. But I really
mm.
want to go, so there's that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The biblioteca is great. I think also just because it's like, kind of a modern version of the Library of Alexandria. But when I went,
Aha.
they had I think that it'll still be there. They have like an exhibition of Shadi Abdel Salam, who was like an Egyptian filmmaker, producer guy.
Mhm.
And at the end of his life, he was storyboarding a Akhenaten film. And they had this exhibition of all of his like drawings and everything that he'd made for the film. And I just went the exhibit. I was like, can somebody please make this movie? It would be so pretty. And then I
Um,
went to the gift shop to get the book and I couldn't find it in English. And then this week, because I saw this story, I looked for the book and I found it on eBay. It arrives like in 2 days. I've been looking
oh,
for this
cool.
book for a decade. I'm so excited. Sorry, side tangent.
No, side tangents are welcome. Come on, that's why we got you here.
Mm,
It's we got to have side tangents. We got to have new informational nuggets. But
mm,
no, I think to me what's really interesting is mapping out this whole area, finding some dock areas.
mhm.
I think piecing together this port in different periods is really cool. Statues, whatever, give or take. Um, okay, since I can't seem to show that image, let's move on to our next story. What
Mhm.
do we have up
One of the
next?
things I was reading and at the end of the stories on this was also about how Canopus is like like a I don't remember what the exact word, but it's like a cautionary tale for Alexandria because at best estimate at much of like a third of it's going to be underwater by like 2050 or unlivable because of
Yeah,
the coast and
subsidence.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And some of that maybe these days has to do with sea level rise.
Hmm.
But in the past, that was not the case. I mean, there hasn't been enough sea level rise between in ancient Greek times to warrant a city going underwater. Instead, that's due, like you said, to earthquakes and subsidence. So the
Hmm.
land sort of falling off into the sea.
Hmm.
But right now, it's going to be a combo of both, ain't it? It's going to,
Yep.
because sea level is rising so fast. It's really quite a problem, and it shows the need for this kind of research quickly before while it's still accessible
Hmm.
as well, because the more turbulent where the coast is, the more likely that this kind of underwater stuff could get destroyed, at least the fragile stuff,
Hmm.
as it shifts. Okay, so let's do some more sifting. Okay, so this one, if I'm yeah, it's this one. Escaped slaves on St. Croix hid their settlements so well they still haven't been found. Archaeologists using new mapping technology are on the hunt. This is written by Dr. Justin Dunavant, and I thought this was cool. It's actually not news because they haven't found
Yeah, it'll
where
eventually be news,
it will
hopefully.
be eventually news, but it's kind of cool because I first came across these sites. I'm currently reviewing this book, Apocalypse by Lizzie Wade, and there's a whole chapter in here on how colonialism and slave trade and stuff has destroyed our world, and it focused in on this specific island. We're looking at Saint Croix. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Saint Croix is
Saint
what I
Croix.
say. Saint what?
Saint Croix. I
Saint
don't
Croix.
know.
Yeah, that's what I would guess, but I
I am
really
Canadian, so I have some French, but
but I don't know how we
yeah,
say it today in
yeah.
modern. Who the hell knows? I'm sorry if you're from Saint Croix or Saint Croix or whatever. I apologize for not being able to pronounce it, but here's where it is. Boom, right in Barbados area, U.S. Virgin
Mm,
Islands. Looks like a lovely place to work.
yes.
Um, but this area has been under intense excavation, actually, to understand better the slave trade and the lives of enslaved peoples. Over the last decade or two, and like I said, it's mentioned in this book, Apocalypse by Lizzie Wade, where she has written on some of this, featuring the excavation, for example. In this article, Caribbean Excavation offers intimate looks at the lives of enslaved Africans. And so they've been trying to not just focus on sort of the wealthy plantation owners, but to understand the lives better of the enslaved people. And it's interesting, actually. They started piecing together the gardening plots that these enslaved people use, and just how resilient and eco-friendly they were when growing their own crops. But of course, when growing the sugar for the owners, they were not able to do that at all. It was just monoculture, monoculture, monoculture. Or there was this other thing which I couldn't find a good photo of. There was this cave nearby, which I imagine must have been their first guess for where these enslaved people were going, because this cave,
Mhm.
it was filled with weapons, with these kind of iron blades in there. And their
Mhm.
initial thought was that this was where the slave rebellion was going to start, right? They were
Mhm.
stockpiling weapons. And then after some more research into historical records and some more research into the studying the materials, it was basically a series, probably more of offerings, sort of ritual sacrificial
Mm.
offerings, where you're offering these implements to whatever they were worshiping at the time in
Mhm.
the 18th, 19th centuries. Um, and so this excavations have really given a kind of intimate look at the lives of enslaved people. And so there's some really excellent African American archaeologists that have been directing it, Alicia Odewale and Justin
Mhm.
Dunavant and others. And so they've done a really good job at trying to look at this. And so I'm really excited to see them find where this maroon
Yeah.
Marienburg is, which is
Yeah.
where they've sort of been looking with GIS technologies, and they've narrowed it down from this entire area on the left to these areas on the right based off of historical records. but they have yet to find the settlement of the escaped enslaved people.
I don't know if
Yeah.
you were meaning to show something on the screen there because it's
Oh, am I
showing
not?
you and me.
Sorry, I'm seeing myself. Ay, ay, ay. I'm
That's okay.
terrible today, aren't I? It's the
I was
gin
at
and tonic I'm drinking.
because I think they were using, yeah, GIS, but then they also, I think, when I read the paper, I got the impression that they wrote like a machine learning program or something like that to help them like identify based on like slope and all of these other things, like which spots are most likely for them to have settled in.
Yeah, which is totally cool.
Hmm.
I mean, I've done some slope type stuff to look at sort of agriculture for climate change, but to combine that with machine learning, that's really, really cool. And
Hmm.
especially in this kind of environment, which looks pretty damn rugged. If you can see why it was chosen anyway. Look
Hmm.
at the relief on it. Um, Yeah, so I imagine one day they will find where Marienburg or Maroon is, where what's the quote from the thing? For a long time now, a large number of escaped slaves have established themselves on lofty Maroon Hill in the mountains towards the west end of the island of St. Croix. They are there protected by the impenetrable bush and by their own wariness. And so, these individuals wanted to stay hidden, and so far they've succeeded in staying hidden from archaeological investigation, but I think these smart people are going to find them, is
Hmm.
my guess.
I'm really hoping so. I think that would be a really great find to make.
Yeah, I agree. It would give a different perspective as well on the lives
Hmm.
of enslaved people, which they've been doing such a good job of putting it together over the last couple decades or so.
Hmm.
Um, okay, our last story. There you go. Yeah. See, it's fun. This is why my audience loves it. Is archaeologists perplexed to find West African ancestry in early medieval England? What? This is
What?
cool. Say what? There's gonna be a new book coming out on all the African connections to England, actually, in the medieval period. I
Oh.
just saw Mary Ramburn Ulm advertising it
Mm.
on Twitter that she just submitted more of a draft of it with Eric Wade. So, so I'm looking forward to that one. We'll get her on, both of them,
Mhm.
when it does come out. But for now, I wonder if this study will get into their revised versions.
Yeah.
You spoke to one of the lead authors of this study, didn't
Yeah.
you, for your
Sunken
video?
Sayer. Yeah. So
Okay.
it's a bit confusing because there's actually kind of 3 papers
Aha.
that
Okay.
cover this. So, how like, so yeah, I spoke to him and we have an interview that's in Archaeology News, which is going on premiering after this live
In
stream ends.
5 minutes. In
In
five
5
minutes.
minutes. It is I do my stories in chronological order, so it is the last story, so you'll have to stick around for, like, 15 minutes to get to it, but whatever. Um, it works out for me if you do that. Uh, yeah, so he's based at the University of Lancashire, and the basic story of it is that they were doing a massive aDNA study, like along and up the coast of England, looking at Anglo-Saxon DNA with an idea to kind of look at ancestry and the effect of like Romans, etc., on the population. And so it's a much wider study. But then within that, they found these two individuals that really stood out, and they decided to then write these two sub papers on these two individuals from Up Down and Worth Matravers.
Can I just
Because
interrupt for a second?
yeah,
In this article, they refer to her as the up down girl, and all I
yeah,
have is Billy Joel going through my head. Up
yeah.
down girl.
Well, Duncan mentions that in the interview. He's like, I quite
Okay.
like the name. They call her Up Down Girl.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, these two individuals stood out because they have West African ancestry. They're from two completely different sites. They are not related at all, to each other. And they are from roughly the same time period. So this is like early Anglo-Saxon England. And this ancestry, in both of them, I believe, it is far enough back that it's a grandparent.
Okay.
So, it's not like an immediate parent or, sorry, like a parent or anything, but what's really cool about Up Down Girl, anyway, um, is that she is related to other people within the same cemetery. So, her
Yeah, I
aunt, her
noticed that.
uncle, and I think a grandmother, are all in the same cemetery with her, the Worth Matravers boy, which I think this is another thing that you could even go on, is he doesn't have anyone related to him in his cemetery, but he's buried in a grave with another man who is
Yeah.
unrelated to him, which is one of those situations where, in the past they would have been like, what are these two guys? Oh, they must have been really
They're
good
holding
friends.
hands. They're really good friends.
Like, we can't imply anything off of that, but I just thought that was kind of like, that's a little bit that just gets completely overlooked in the papers. But yeah, I think the populations that this grandparent would have been related to were closest to like modern day Yoruba and a few other tribes in West Africa. And so
Okay.
this obviously brings up a whole question of, how did those grandparents get there? What were they doing in England? It's unfortunate that we don't have the grandparent to look at their DNA, and see if there's anything that we can imply about their life, and what may have brought them to England. Did they grow up there? Did they grow up in West Africa and travel there and live there for a while, et cetera, et cetera? We don't know. But I mean, I think there were some people, I did read one or two headlines that were talking about like slaves, but interestingly, this isn't really a period where that's necessarily what was expected. It's more probably like a trade thing
Yeah, and
because
giving them the
yeah,
sort of normal burial would suggest that they're not enslaved people. And then, from what I was reading, they think that the movement probably happened a generation or two earlier when the Byzantines had conquered North Africa.
yeah,
So they might have gotten to the Mediterranean, and then from there, another generation over to England. I mean, it's
mhm.
quite a distance if you sort of just. I got my Google Maps thing going on. You got it over in Kent, and then you search for Ghana. I just chose Ghana as a place in
Yeah,
West Africa, Sub-Sahara, and that's quite a
it's a long
distance
way to
to
go.
go, you know? I mean,
Yep.
I could see it taking several generations.
Mhm.
So, yeah. So if you wanna hear more, go tune into Inside Archaeology. That's where this redirects to.
Mhm.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Flint.
Rhymes and riddles, tickle, tickle, giggles, squiggle, jiggle,
Here, wait, let me get the
rhymes and
into the
riddles,
chat.
tickle, tickle, giggles, squiggle, jiggle,
I didn't realize you had a theme song.
Yeah, R.M. Brown made it for me.
Nice.
Yeah. He was making fun of me when he made it, but then we became cool together. He thought I was part of the Rogan verse. Thank you all. I put into the chat Rachel's link. Go check it out now.